So that was a little bit about me. So what does it mean to be in IT? Well, I mean, the reason I put that up there was because I did A-level English, and we had to study George Orwell, so we had to do 1984, the book, in 1984. So when we did the exams, we had to make sure that we'd seen everything that was in the press and be able to quote what the news articles were saying about it. But I started work, as I said at the beginning, on November the 5th, 1984, and I can still remember that day that I was offered that job, because I'd gone to college, I'd got my A-level in computer science and in English, and I really didn't know what was going to happen after that. I didn't want to go to university because at that time I was really quiet. Now, I'm not naturally a quiet person, but you know how things just get knocked into you. When I was at primary school, I must have been probably about 7 or 8, and I can remember being at a parents' evening, and this one teacher said to my mother, you should make sure that she's a bit quieter because she's never going to amount to anything because all she does is talk. And from that moment on, I just went quiet. So you would not have seen me or known anything about me at school. I just snuck through it and was really, really quiet. I'm not now because it's not naturally me. But, you know, these things, they do have an impact on how you behave and what you do. So it was interesting when I'd got my A-levels, trying to figure out what I was going to do, not going to university. And thankfully, I was offered a job as a programmer. So I didn't really know what programming was going to be like, but I used a very weird language called Silicon Office, which you won't have heard of, and it's not survived. But I used to write software for estate agents, so I used to write the financial bit of it. And I worked for a very, very small company that was in Leamington, that was actually owned by a guy who was a jeweller. And in the early 1980s, IT had only just become popular in business, and not every business had a computer. And the ones that were around were huge. I mean, we have small technology now. We have iPhones and things. My phone, this phone here, has got more computing capability than the first ones I programmed. And the first one I used was an IBM PC, and all it had got, does anybody know what a floppy disk drive looks like? What a floppy disk, yeah. Well, I used them when the 3.5-inch soft floppy disk drives. And the computers I used only had 2 360k floppy disk drives. So, I mean, the power in them was just so low, it was untrue. But that's what we had at the time, and it was brilliant because nobody had ever had a computer before. So it's what you get used to. But I used to program on those. And then apricot machines, which again, you probably won't have heard of because I don't think apricot survived. But they were brilliant. But the programming aspect, for me, just didn't do it. The company I worked for was really interesting because it was owned by a jeweller, and the businesses that sprang up in the early 1980s, all thinking they were going to make masses of money out of IT, actually a lot of them didn't survive because they knew nothing about how to use IT properly, how to run an IT organisation. So it went bust. And I went to work for another company, and I worked near the sales team. So I'd sort of gone to be a programmer and then moved across and done something that was more in line with seeing clients and going out and being customer facing. So it was interesting just sort of changing that aspect and going and being client facing. So I used to do all the training. So when, you know, Excel, well, I used to train on the spreadsheets before Excel was invented, because I remember before Microsoft took the world over. When you used to have, it wasn't just the Microsoft operating systems, IBM had a big operating system called PC-DOS. So I remember before that. And then I did a lot with Unix systems, which are big multi-user systems. And Unix is fantastic if you've ever come across it, or Linux, which is the derivative of Unix. But I went down quite a technical route because I just found it interesting. So I used to install systems and I used to install networks.